Hello, welcome to the virtual interview that we have today on this cloudy and rainy day here in the Southern Tier. My name is Adam Piasecki, and I am an at-large board member and trustee with the Midstate Central Labor Council in the Central New York Labor Federation, the regional body of the AFL-CIO. I'm also a union leader. I'm the current president of the Ithaca Teachers Association. I'm going to allow our guest to introduce herself, but I did want to acknowledge that she is the AFL-CIO endorsed candidate for the Senate District 58 here in New York.
Adam, I really appreciate it. It's a true honor to be endorsed by the AFL-CIO. What I'm seeing is that so many people are coming together to take a stand for working people and fair jobs and the income that we all need to support our families. And it's a real honor to have an organization behind me that has stood for that for so many decades in our country's history. I'm Leslie Danks Burke. I'm running for New York State Senate in the 58th State Senate District, which is a huge 5-county region covering Tompkins, Chemung, Steuben, Schuyler, and Yates counties in the Southern Tier and the Finger Lakes. And I'm running for this seat because I see that we have had decades of neglect here in the Southern Tier and Finger Lakes area. We've been sending the same representation to Albany. Our taxes are through the roof, and yet we're not getting the money back that we're promised. For our schools are deeply underfunded, for our bridges and roads, for our infrastructure, our job needs. And I am running alongside all the working people in the AFL-CIO and in so many labor unions like NYSET, where you are, Adam, and so many others, to stand up and finally get a fair share for our region.
Great, that's a great segue. So yes, you've received many union endorsements, so we're actually going to focus on that as the topic of our questions. So our first question today is, what differentiates your labor policy positions with that of your opponent?
So I stand with working people. I stand for the principles that the AFL has stood for decades. Labor unions in the United States got us a 5-day work week. They got us weekends. They got us minimum wage. They got us women's equality in the workplace. And my opponent does not stand for those propositions. I support the Wicks law. My opponent voted to roll it back. I support paid sick leave for all workers. My opponent just at the beginning of this pandemic voted against that. I 100% support the right of workers to organize and collectively bargain for better wages and working conditions. My opponent, the incumbent, holds a side job at a lobbying firm that brags of its work to help employers maintain a union-free workplace. So his income, actually more of his income, comes from this side job at a lobbying firm, comes from representing corporations that are trying to eliminate unions in their workplaces. And that is counter to the interests of the American worker, and it's especially counter to the interests of folks right here in the Southern Tier and Finger Lakes, many of whom are struggling desperately to raise their family on the wages they're paid. I have heard so many stories in the last 8 months of this pandemic from folks who are in labor unions and folks who are not. And every single story I've heard has reinforced my view that the unions are out there taking care of people's opportunity to provide for their families. And when you're forced to go it alone and stand up to a big corporation all by yourself, you're just not going to get a fair shake.
Thank you for that. Yeah, the history of the labor movement, and then the factoid about your opponent earning money off of anti-union work is very startling, and we will continue to spread that message. The next question is, how will you promote the growth of labor unions and increase the number of union jobs here in the Senate District?
Well, the first thing that we have to do is get the money that we are owed. And I'd like to just point out, for years in a row, my opponent has voted in favor of taking money that was promised to us here for our bridges and roads, our upstate infrastructure, and sending that money to other parts of the state instead. So you pay a small gas tax every time you go and fill up your tank at the pump. And that money is supposed to come back to invest in bridges and roads here. And that's infrastructure, which is desperately important. It's also jobs. And so when my opponent votes year after year to take that money that was already promised to us and send it other places instead, then that's cutting back on good union jobs that we could have here. So the first thing we have to do is send someone to Albany who's actually going to get us the money we're promised. That's the first way we increase the number of union jobs. The second thing we do is we focus on training opportunities. We make sure to build our next generation of the workforce. We see an aging workforce in manufacturing and in union jobs, and we need to make sure that we're investing locally and building that next generation. And finally, I see that the expansion of clean energy investment will really bring more good paying jobs to this area. We're seeing a real boom in clean energy jobs, and I want to see those come right here. There are lots of people here who could work in those sectors. Unfortunately, what we're seeing is that the way Albany is structured with sort of the glad handing and the backroom dealing, those jobs are getting sent to other parts of the state and they're not coming here. We need someone who's going to get in there and fight hard for us.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a good point. You've obviously, gone back and forth a gazillion times across the southern tier and in this region, and the infrastructure is desperately needed. And you're right, that's the connection. Those could be union jobs right here where people will be living and where people will be spending their money. And that's desperately needed. We've seen that decline here over the years.
It's sure true, Adam. Every single time you hit a pothole out there, think to yourself, man, my senator voted to send the money away that could have fixed this pothole, and we could have hired somebody local to fix it. It's a problem.
Yeah. And when people are local, you can do it local, right? And that's very important. Okay, we're going to move on to the next question. Why do you believe that unions are important here in New York and maybe just everywhere?
It is important everywhere, and we see declining union membership across the country. That's because of a full-on assault on labor unions. It's a basic financial interest in the company. They're going to make more money for their bottom line profit if they can get rid of labor unions. We can't stand for that. People need to be able to support their families, and anybody who's investing years in a company deserves, that real opportunities to succeed. We do have stronger labor unions in New York than in a lot of parts of the country, and that's something that we should be proud of and that we should continue to support. I stand 100% with labor. It's a huge part of the New York State economy. It ensures that workers can be paid what they're worth and they're treated fairly for their work. They become more productive workers that way. If all you're concerned about is the bottom line, you're going to have a more productive labor force if they're compensated fairly. It also makes sure that we have workplace safety, which is key, I think, to any corporation's bottom line. Anybody who's thinking long-term investment is going to be interested in making sure that their labor force is safe. I just had the chance to tour Coach and Equipment up in Penn Yan, which is, there's a UAW local that represents the workers there. And the safety and the cleanliness that I saw there in that assembly line was just extraordinary. And when I did my tour, I visited with the local president and also with the management of the company. They together took me on a tour, and they were, to a man, proud of what they have achieved with their union workforce, both on the corporate management side and on the labor side. And that was just really tremendous to behold the working together and the teamwork that's happening and the output that you have, the cleanliness and the safety and the production that really happens with a solid union workforce. Unions can also close the gap of inequality that we have in our society. And union workplaces have been better able to minimize the wage gap between men and women. And that's sure something that we need to be paying close attention to right now, especially at a time when women are losing wages faster in this pandemic recession than we see men are.
Yeah, that's a good point. As a local union president, even though I'm a male, I often push that and say, we as a labor organization are constantly pushing the fact that we don't have the issue of the gender inequality because we are union. So even though we're constantly promoting the articles about inequality, we often then say, but here's a way to solve it. And we don't have that issue because our contract doesn't say you get paid differently because of your gender. So it is kind of the success of the labor movement. And thank you for acknowledging that is crucial as a 22-year-old comes into the labor force, they know their union has built that equal opportunity.
And we see that same movement growing and building among, union members who are deeply concerned about people of color being paid less than white people are in the workforce. When you have a union contract, that contract is not going to tolerate that sort of differential. And so, more and more, I see this tremendous alignment of concern among people who are worried about workplace safety and worker rights in general, but also are really paying attention to those intersectional differences between subgroups within the working population that sometimes get disenfranchised.
Right. Very good points. The next question, I think you kind of addressed, but I'll say it anyway in case there's anything you want to add on. What is the more pressing issue affecting unions and the members that you would address as a senator?
We are paying into the system and we're not getting the funds back. And what do I mean by that? We are paying sky high taxes here as working people and middle class folks in the Southern Tier and the Finger Lakes. And what that's doing is it's going to subsidize the folks at the tippity top who don't pay any taxes at all. And those folks really don't live here in the Southern Tier and the Finger Lakes. They tend to be billionaires who live downstate, and they're getting subsidized by our very high taxes. So what I intend to do on day one when I get to Albany is introduce a bill to move that burdensome property tax weight off of the middle and lower income folks and start getting those at the top to pay their fair share so that we don't have these exorbitant taxes holding us down.
Okay. Thank you for that response. Our next question is, what role will and do unions currently play and will play in the recovery of this current pandemic?
So we have a tremendous opportunity to invest in infrastructure right now. That to me is the key driver of our economy. It is the most GDP enhancing investment you can make is infrastructure investment. And we saw that in the 30s when we had that recession and FDR stepped in and got everybody to work and we invested in infrastructure and we did that through union jobs. We can do that again. And goodness knows we need that infrastructure investment here in the Southern Tier and the Finger Lakes. Again, I'll mention the potholes that you hit over and over that my opponent votes to send the money to fill them. He votes to send it somewhere else. We can invest in those infrastructure needs in rural broadband, in getting union jobs in place that will start doing broadband build out so that we get that last mile internet access that we've been promised in New York State, but that has not come because the corporations get their grant funds, but then they don't make good on their promises. I want to see tremendous investment in infrastructure because it reaps rewards dramatically, it saves money in the long run, and it creates good paying, safe union jobs. There is no better recipe for success in a pandemic, in a recession, than taking that infrastructure investment opportunity that we've got right now.
That's great. I really like how you connected, the infrastructure is needed here in the Senate district, but it would then create the union jobs. It's the building
Absolutely.
of the roads and the bridges, but it's also the clean energy, which we do see a lot of ability here in this region to be able to do those solar farms and other types of clean energy. And if we back them with union labor, that is the income that people need to survive. The contracts that we just talked about a few minutes ago are going to come along with the insurance for everybody. So we don't have people who don't have health insurance. So it's all very connected. So that's why it's great to have a candidate that's really pushing for the supporting of the labor unions.
Well, and I'll mention also on the school side, the education investment would be tremendous. And then on the nursing and healthcare side, our rural hospitals have been left behind for years, and we see that in a real breakdown of the supply chain. So if we were to invest in our rural hospitals, get ourselves prepared for what we see coming with the pandemic, because we are not through this yet by any stretch, and really start to make good on that rural hospital infrastructure investment, that will reap rewards for the long term. And we can, we can educate our nurses. We can make sure that our nurses have the opportunity to grow and thrive in their jobs. Every one of those sectors, education, infrastructure, manufacturing, nursing, healthcare, getting good union paying jobs in there will make a huge difference.
That's a great connection too, as a representative of teachers, but then also with the AFL-CIO, is that, yeah, our members are nurses, hospital workers, and teachers. And so that's great that you making sure that you're speaking about them as well. As a teacher representative, because you've been involved in education interviews, that we have students and teachers who do not have the internet that they need to provide this virtual education during a pandemic. And that is a huge barrier for many students.
It's a tremendous barrier. It holds our students back. It holds our local businesses back. An anecdote that I share a lot is that you have to pay your payroll taxes as a small business owner online. And in the pandemic, if you're running your small business from your home now and you have no internet access, then you can't comply with that state requirement to do your payroll taxes online. You have to drive into a library or sit in the parking lot of somewhere that has internet to do that. And we're making our children do that too, to do their homework and to do their schooling online. Meanwhile, we've paid lots of money in taxes that went to state grants, that went to companies that were supposed to build out that internet, and they didn't do it. And we're really paying for that now. So I want to see that state investment in that broadband internet infrastructure rollout, because I think that's an investment for the long term that would truly jumpstart our economy.
Yeah, that's great. As you drive by and see your signs, you see jobs, schools, farms, and that's actually what you continue to speak about. So that's great, and we know that you're supporting those. We could talk for a really long time on all of these topics. I just wanted to say thank you for the time to talk today. We look forward to celebrating next week, having you be our representative of the Senate District 58.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. Everybody who's out there voting already, you're tremendous for stepping up and exercising your opportunity to hold your elected leaders accountable. And I think that we're not going to have all the ballots counted right on election night because so many folks are voting absentee. But I am sure looking forward to celebrating with everyone once we know the final tallies.
That'd be great. Well, hey, get some rest before you go to your next event. It was great talking with you. And again, thank you for backing labor.
I really appreciate it, Adam. Thank you.
No problem.